Hi, everybody. Nice to see you at the webinar. We are about to start the webinar in a couple of minutes. Let's maybe wait until everybody joins. In the meantime, if you can write something in the chat, maybe where you're joining from, that would be good, so that I know that everything is working, audio is working, video is working. So that would be much appreciated. I can see that some people are starting to join. Hi, Enoch. So I see that Claire is joining from Colorado, USA. Some guys are joining from Chicago as well. Zan is joining from Las Vegas. So yeah, quite a few people from the different states of the US. Actually, today we had our first session. It was the same topic, and we've decided to split it up into two sessions: one for the European countries and some Middle East and other regions in the different time zones. And this second one is a later session, so that we can also make sure that those folks from the US and from the Latin America and from that side of the world, that they can join in a more appropriate time for them. So yeah, quite a few people from different countries, different states, different cities. Nice to see a healthy mix. So my name is Alex. I'm a product lead here at Lokalise, and today I will be leading this webinar. And I'm joined by my colleague Emils today, who will be assisting me in the chat. So in case you will spot any audio or video issues, anything like that, Emils will be there to help you out. He will also make sure to guide you, where to ask questions and etc. etc. So he will be my helping hand today. And just before we start, a couple of ground rules. On the right-hand side, you can see the chat. There are also a couple of other tabs there. One of them is the tab called Questions. So it really encourage everybody to ask their questions in that respective tab, in the Questions tab, because it will be easier for me to make sure that I answer them at the end of the session. And feel free to ask the questions along the way, but I will make sure to dedicate 5 to 7 minutes at the end of the webinar to have a proper Q&A session and answer all of those. So our topic for today is starting localization from scratch. It's really more targeted towards those who consider to be beginners in the localization niche, but I'm sure that also those who maybe are a bit more advanced will find some useful insights as well. So I guess without further ado, let's kick everything off. So let me share my presentation here. So today we are going to start off with a presentation. I'm aiming to spend a bit like 20 to 25 minutes on the presentation. Then I will also show you the Lokalise UI, and we'll show a couple of things inside Lokalise. And then, as I've said, at the end of the webinar, we'll have the dedicated Q&A. Cool. So without further ado, let's start. Can you see, by the way, my presentation well? Can you see the slides? It would be nice to know. Okay. So Ernest is saying that she can see that. Perfect. Perfect. So let's zoom out a little bit. Basically, localization is a must-have for the companies that would like to expand to new markets, that would like to become global and international companies. So I found an interesting stat online a couple of days ago. As much as 75% of all internet users in Asia, Europe, and South America prefer buying from websites in their native language. That makes sense. So if you can think of some products, some websites, some e-commerce stores, etc., maybe a lot of people know English language and they can buy, for example, some goods from the e-commerce stores which are not localized. But really, there's so many of us. There's so much population and so much audience, global audience, who are not as savvy with English language, and it's easier for them to navigate in their own language. I found a very interesting post on LinkedIn actually yesterday, where the guy said that if somebody asks you about whether, you know, going global and expanding to new markets is of necessity at all, or if rolling out new languages in your product is necessary, give him a mobile phone and change the language to the one that he doesn't know. And it will be very hard for him to make any sense of the phone, to call, to, you know, download the apps, etc., etc. It will become almost impossible to use that device. And that's what happens with the global audience, with the 75% of people who actually might not be getting benefits from your product, from your e-commerce store, or from anything else. So that's why we really encourage companies to start thinking about going global right from the very beginning, because localization is just one part of the process. But you have to, if your ambitions and aspirations are to you know, be present in multiple markets, globalization and localization is something that you have to think about in the very early stages, and that will actually impact some other you know, some other initiatives and some activities that you will be doing along the way as well. So how to prepare for that? And I've tried to be very sort of generic and high level here. So I've divided the high level preparation into 3 steps. The first one, a very important one, is to choose and prioritize your target markets. So let's say we are a product based in Europe. There's so many countries in Europe, so many different languages. How do I decide where I, you know, where I expand, where I roll out? And the best thing here is to actually look at your existing analytics. I'm sure that you have different sources of data, like Google Analytics or some other analytic tools, and it's pretty easy to just check what are the, you know, the regions, the countries where your audience is from, or when they are, you know, navigating your website or your product or anything else. And similarly with the mobile devices, it's possible to check actually in the mobile stats what is their default language installed on their device. And if that's not English, that will give you an indication what are, you know, the percentage of the specific audience that you know, is operating the mobile device with a specific language that is installed as the default language on that device. And that would already give you some understanding, where should I go? And then if, you know, sometimes companies have quite ambitious plans in terms of how many markets they want to expand to, how many languages they need to roll out in their product, and try to think of them in logical steps and try to divide them into 2 tiers, or maybe even more, depending on your business needs and business potential as well. So for example, I have been working with one customer who they have quite limited resources, and they know that they are present in some core markets like Germany, France, Spain, where they want to allocate more efforts, time, and money on. And these are the markets where they hire professional translators, professional linguists, and basically they want to make sure that the copy in these languages is of a highest possible quality. But then there are some secondary markets which are also important, but not as much. They still want to be present there, but they don't care if maybe the copy is not as, you know, of such a high standard. So they actually use a machine translation engines to translate all the content for that second tier markets, and it works for them. It works for the audience. Audience understands that it's maybe not their core market, but it's still easier for them to navigate because of the specifics of that product. And so my main point here is that basically you can divide your regions, your countries in a couple of segments, and that it will be easier for you to allocate, you know, the efforts and the time and the money to the most important ones versus the least important ones. Then the second step is defining the scope. Defining the scope of what needs to be translated and localized is crucially important, and this is something that is constantly overlooked. So your product that you're selling, let's say it's a B2B SaaS company, obviously you will think about translating that product. There's so many things that come together with that, like website, landing page, or maybe landing pages for marketing, marketing departments if there are multiples, product documentation that your users are reading in order to make sense of your product, some legal documents that needs to be translated if you roll the product out in other markets, emails, notifications, and a lot of other stuff. So before you begin and before you decide that we will go to that and that and that market, probably the second thing after choosing your markets, what you need to do is to define your content scope. So how much content I will have to translate and localize and what comes together with it. And then you will have a clearer timeline and clear estimates. And we will touch on estimates and timeline a bit later on. The third and also often overlooked step is forming the core team. So I very often came across companies who are deciding that, okay, so we want to roll out, in this specific markets. Let's assume it's, Canada. So we need to translate our product to French because there are some cities where only French is spoken. And that's it. So they decide, and then they think that they will hire translators, and that's it. So that's done. But that's not the case. You really want to form a team that will be responsible for that, rolling out that program, I would say, the localization program. And that can include developers, linguists, country managers, marketing specialists, sales executive, and even legal advisors, because there might be some legal pitfalls, and you want to make sure that you understand those before you're rolling out the product there. Because, for example, if you're not abiding some cultural specific things in your copy, then you might be screwed. And another thing here that I want to emphasize on is you really want to make somebody an owner of that localization program, so that there is a specific person or specific department, specific unit in your organization that is responsible for the whole localization program rollout, because otherwise it can become a real chaos. I-18N, or internationalization. So that's the process of engineering a product so that it can be adapted to target languages and regions efficiently without requiring too much engineering changes to the core product. And that's also a very important step to take before you start with actually translating your product. I-18N encompasses some things like removing the hard-coded strings. You never want your copy to be hard-coded in your code. You want to indeed replace it with a key value pairs, so that there is some key identifiers in the code, and basically then the value is taken based on the translated value of the locale that your user is opening up on their device. Because if you don't do that, it will become a real pain in the ass for you to roll out new languages and make sure that to always hard code all the copy for the different languages. It will simply become a nightmare. Then you want to make sure to use Unicode formatting, UTF-8, because there are some languages like Arabic, like German, where the specific symbols, some specifics that come with them. And in case you don't, so in case the Unicode formatting is not supported, then your copy might become unreadable in some of the instances, and that will result in a very bad user experience. Then you want to enable your code to support some local preferences. So for example, it can be a specific forms of the addresses, currencies, what else? Specific form of the date and time. And actually I have a really good real life example. When I was working for another company, we have been sending out the automated emails about the subscription renewal. And there was a dynamic content, the expiration date, the subscription expiration date. And so it was always sent out in one single format. And it actually resulted in some misunderstanding in some countries, where this format was never used in a daily life. And it actually resulted in quite bad experience, because they thought that their subscription expires after 5 months, but not, in this given month. And it actually, the whole situation ended up with that customer churning. So there's some, nuances that you have to think of in order to make sure that it really corresponds to the needs of that specific region. And IATN, or internalization, is something that you want to do properly before you commence to the localization stage, before you start translating your product, because otherwise all the changes that you will have to make in the future, they will be a really painful ones. Estimation and preparation. So as I've said earlier, this is a very important thing, especially if you're just starting out. I actually listened to another conference, and there was a guy who said a brilliant thing. He said that whenever there is some localization activities happening within the company, it differs how it's all, where it sits under the organizational structure. So it can be that localization department, and if there is such, it has a very supportive function. So they support everybody else to make sure that product documentation, etc., is translated and localized properly. But in this case, it's very hard for the localization people to shine and to prove their value. But there is another type of the company where localization is a very strategic activity, and people who are owning that are very strategic themselves as well. So and that's, if you're deciding to roll out and to expand into new markets, it's very important to make sure that to provide some KPIs like ROI, return on investment. And in order to do so, you need to understand how much your whole program will cost and how much you can get out of it. So in order to calculate the costs, there are some generic benchmarks. So when you're working with a translation agency or some translators, they usually will charge you per word for the specific language pairs. And not only that, if we also speak about the timeline, on an average, the translator can translate 2,500 words per day. But again, that's very generic figures, and it really depends on the context and the complexity of the product and a lot of other variables, but still something to play around with. But don't be fooled into the trap that that's the only cost that is there, only the translation, that's it, because there are others. So for example, if your core team, there's only one localization, let's say, program manager, and you've decided to go a route where you outsource most of the work, then you really need to have a strong partner, a strong LSP, language service provider, who will not only translate the text, but they will also provide some additional language services like language quality assurance. There will be a dedicated project manager. So, and you really want to account for that extra cost as well. So extra costs for additional language services, for project management overheads, and etc. Technology. Once you decide what TMS or other technology you would be using, you need to understand what will be the subscription fees. And there are different subscription models for the players out there in the market. Team expansion. As I've said, you might want to hire some additional country managers, for example, and that also would be an extra cost that you have to bear. Finding the right partner, finding the right translation agency or LSP, it's a very important thing to do, because LSPs, they can be there can be some who are focused on the specific industries or specific regions, specific languages, and they really do their job well there. But for example, let's say you want to cover more regions and languages, and then probably you will have to maybe even choose 2 different LSPs to work with. And you want to make sure that they have this proven expertise in your selected regions, languages, and also your niche, because otherwise you can end up with not so high quality translations at the end of the day, and that would become a real problem in the end. So what you can do, you can ask for references from the similar customers. You can also order a test translations to measure the quality. Usually all of them are quite happy to do that, even like free of charge in the very beginning, just so that you can understand And for example, if you get a sample translations from them, you can cross-check it with another translation provider and see if the quality is good enough. And the last but not least is also experience working with modern technologies. And speaking about technologies, there's so many players now at the market. And previously there were just tools for the translators to work with. It was a simple CAT tools, computer-assisted translation tools, where you import the file, you translate it, and that's it. And you leverage some things like glossary, translation memory, and that's it. But now these tools evolved and they're way more complex. So for example, Lokalise not only caters for the needs of translators, but also for the needs of developers, for the needs of project managers, for the needs of designers, and et cetera, et cetera. So you really want to make sure that the technology ticks all the boxes for you and for your partner. Seamless integration with other existing tools. So you want to make sure that TMS sits right in the middle of your tool stack. Automation and pre-translation capabilities to save on running costs, and that's another one. So there are some tools that allow you to automate a lot of the routine tasks, which means that you have to spend your people have to spend less time on these activities. And you can also leverage, for example, translation memory in order to pre-translate some text, and you won't be paying the LSP or translators at the end of the day. And you can also benefit from the TM discounts as well. So for example, if there is a partial match, something that was already partially translated, you won't be paying as much as you would pay for the full-blown new text. And yeah, wrapping up with the last kind of step, localization. So there is some things involved in that you should take care of as well. So language resources, I cannot stress enough on the importance of this. Preparing your glossary, your style guide, your visual context before you pass the project to your translators, because otherwise it will be very difficult for them to provide the best possible quality, as they won't understand what is the tone of voice that you're using, what are the specific terminology that your product has, or what is the visual context where this string actually sits within the product. Setting up and configuring your projects before you actually ramp up with the translation projects, really taking a couple of hours or days even to set up your project, set up all the integrations, and make sure that it works properly before you go with the live translation projects. Documenting the workflow. Again, I see so many customers who are not doing that, and then if there are many teams involved, there are many products across the organization, many stakeholders, designers, developers, translators, outsourced LSPs, and so on and so forth. So the workflow becomes a sort of a mess. It's a bit chaotic. It's quite hard to understand what's happening when, and so on and so forth. So documenting this workflow in a simple, flow chart is something that you can do, and that would help you big time. Running a proof of concept with a selected technology and partner. And usually both technology vendors and partners are quite happy with that. So you can take a couple of weeks or a month to do your proof of concept and make sure that this actually works, this workflow works for everybody, and then you are getting the value out of it. And then obviously, once you've done your proof of concept, you can arrange the translations, review and test the translated content that you get from your linguists, make sure that it satisfies your needs, obviously. And once it's done and you get the ball rolling, last but not least is implementing the continuous localization workflow and monitoring the results. Continuous localization workflow is a buzzword in our industry, but this is something that you need to do in order to keep up with the agile world of the software development, because otherwise, if your approach is very waterfall-like, then it will be hard for you to bring everybody on the same page, including the developers who are already. It's convenient for them to work in an agile fashion and to make sure that you can roll out features, weekly or every second week. And localization can be a part of that process if you integrate it properly with your internal systems. Here are a couple of quotes from our customers, and I won't be reading those out loud, but one that I think resonates with me very well is, localizing for the sake of localizing would be a mistake. And here I want to make sure that you're not doing that only because somebody told you. You can measure the results. What is the and that's where I said about the ROI and really establishing some metrics for you to measure what is the return on investment that you made and how the expanding into more markets helped you to promote your product and to sell it globally. And here is a quick checklist that I've prepared for you. So basically that sort of combines all the points that I've discussed previously. And I will be sending out the recording as well as the slides after the webinar finishes. And so you can also refer back to this checklist to make sure that you tick all of these boxes. But now let's jump into the real world scenario. So I have prepared a couple of projects in Lokalise, and let's assume I'm the product and I have a customer-facing app, a partner-facing app. Let's say I'm Uber or something like that, right? So they have customer-facing apps and they have partner-facing app as well. I have some marketing content, some websites, some blogs that my marketing people are responsible for. I also have my support people who are, first of all, receiving some requests in the chat, but second of all, they also have documentation stored in the help desk center. And then I have some other documents. So in my case, it will be some legal documents and emails. So let me quickly share my screen. Here we go. I hope you can see that. So, and let me open up this Lokalise here. So I have prepared a couple of projects. For example, in Lokalise, you can manage different file formats. So in my first project, it's a legal documentation. I have uploaded the Word file. Let's open it up. And here we go. So I can work with my Word, and I can then export it in the same Word format whenever I need to do that. So my legal documentation can be translated in Lokalise, and Lokalise or any other TMS can become a single source of truth for you of all the translations, and you can also benefit from the previously translated content because there might be something that you've translated for the marketing people, which will be also relevant for your legal or vice versa. And even more important thing is that you can leverage the same vendors that you work with. So let's go here into the team settings, and here we have a section called vendors. So I've only added one vendor for now, but again, you can have multiple. So for example, you have a dedicated vendor, for the legal translations, and some others who are doing some other translations as well. And here you can see, my rate card. So how much, what was agreed with my LSP, language service provider, in terms of the translations for the different language pairs and for my global rate. But I can also, what I can have is I can have a specific weight card for the legal translation, because this requires a bit more work from the translator side of things. So I can define other rates here, basically, for the legal translations. And that's how you can, work with your legal documents within Lokalise. Then here I've uploaded the HTML file. So HTML was exported from my, we are using MailChimp here, from MailChimp. And again, here I can translate it easily to, Spanish, Russian, any other languages. The cool thing about that is also that all the, HTML placeholders won't be an inconvenience for your translators, because basically they will be visualized as blocks here, and sometimes translators are not just comfortable working with them. So again, another file format that you can work with in Lokalise. Then let's move to the apps. So we have our customer-facing app here, and I haven't added the languages yet. So just to show you how easy it is, for example, if you have set up everything and then you decide to add more languages further down the line, in Lokalise, it's very easy to add, the languages and just, translate later on, and you will be ready to go. So let's add a couple here. Let's add Russian. Let's add Spanish. Oops. Okay, let it be Spanish, Argentina. And so what I wanted to show here is that actually this content was pushed here to Lokalise from Adobe XD, which is a design tool, and we integrate with different design tools like Sketch, like Figma, and now also Adobe XD. And so basically all the screenshots were pushed along together with the text copy and it's very easy for me to see where this text is on the user interface. And for example, what I'll do now is I will switch to my Adobe XD project here, and let me first maybe do some Google Translate. So let me translate with a Google translation engine. And again, Lokalise has multiple machine translation engines available. So let me quickly do a couple of translations here, and then let me switch back to my Adobe XD, and let me quickly show you how easy it is to pull selected content. So I'm now will be pulling that from Lokalise, and so what it will do, it will pull not only the English strings, but also the translated strings as well. Take some time for me to load for some reason. Let me quickly maybe refresh that. Pull selected. Taking some time here, but basically what the core idea of the plugin is that you can start your localization at the design stage, and you can really push and pull the content between two platforms, between Adobe XD, let's say, and Lokalise. And whenever you push your English strings, right, the translators will have enough context to translate it, and then you will be able to pull it back to your Adobe XD in order to preview how translations look like. For some reason, it's unfortunate that I'm not able to pull it now. I will have to look into that, but yeah, that's a karma. Every time you do the demo, something happens. But basically, if you are interested in that functionality, you can reach out to our intercom, and our sales guys will show you how it works. I'm a bit cautious of time, so let me quickly go through other projects that we have here. So for example, partner-facing app, let's say this is something that another team is working on, and they don't, they are not, don't really want to start the localization at the design stage. And for example, they want to have, it's a very technical team who is working on that. They want to pull all the strings directly from the Git repository to Lokalise and work in that fashion. So again, it's pretty, there are different integrations with the different Git repositories that we have. And basically, once you integrate with your files that are stored in the Git repository, whenever these files will be changed, for example, the developer will push new updates, new keys, or update the existing ones, it will be, it can be automatically pulled to Lokalise as well, so that you can be aware of all the changes that happen. So in our case, we've just pulled our source English JSON file with all these keys that you see here. And let me go to the last two, but not least. So websites and blogs and intercom articles. In this case, basically that covers the documentation part. So my support team, they can easily integrate with the intercom articles, for example, or Zendesk, and pull their documentation to Lokalise. Again, leverage all the tools that you have inside the Lokalise, such as glossary, translation memory, machine translation engines, tasks, workflows, custom status, etc. Do the work properly, and then export it back to where it needs to be stored in intercom in this case. So as you can see here, I can see all of my articles. And the same with the website. We have a couple of integrations with a few CMS systems, including WordPress and Contentful. I won't really go into too much details now here, because I'm really cautious of the time, and I want to make sure that I answer the questions that you guys have. But that's basically it. So a couple of maybe key takeaways here is that when you're looking at the technology, like a TMS, you want to have a really flexible and scalable solution that would cater not only for the needs of your translators, but for the needs of all stakeholders involved, designers, developers, project managers, etc., etc. You want to have a tool that will have some some possibilities of automation or pre-translations. And in case of Lokalise, for example, you are able to do some bulk actions. You can pre-translate the strings with 100% TM matches. So for example, here apply TM to all the strings in case something was already translated in the past. You can use the webhooks to, again, our webhooks and API to develop some custom integrations and make sure, for example, whenever the new strings are added to Lokalise, that you trigger a task creation or order creation, or you pre-translate everything with the machine translation engines. So there are lots of kind of flexibilities that you have here. And really management and transparency, making sure that everybody sort of is transparent and you can see the progress for all the projects. So let me now switch. So let me now disable the screen sharing and focus on a couple of questions that we had here. So Naidu is asking, how do we localize authorization permission like camera location, etc. in info-pleased iOS? Naidu, that's a good question, and I would say that there is no easy and straightforward answer to that. We do support the pleased file formats, so it's possible to upload these files to Lokalise. It's possible to upload them in automated ways as well. But I'd say it's better for you to get in touch through the intercom, and one of our either customer success managers or sales execs would be able to help you to really understand your problem in a bit more details and help you with that. Peter is asking, our documentation will be either Markdown or restructured text. Are those formats supported for import-export? Peter, that's a good question. So Markdown is something that we actually have on the roadmap. And basically, yeah, once we release that, it will be possible for you to work with the Markdown files in a similar fashion as you now do with others. Stephanie is asking, does the system have some automated translated tool integrated in it where you can review the translation? Yes, Stephanie, you can leverage our API and automatically, as I've said, so whenever your file is uploaded, right, from whatever the source is, you can receive a webhook, the translations have been modified or uploaded or whatever, and then call an API endpoint to order either the machine translations or even order the translations from the specific translation vendors. And then once they are translated, again, your system or you can be notified in Slack by setting up a Slack integration that task or order is completed, and then you can just review the strings and that's it. Don is asking, are these examples available of the workflow process from exporting the content from the CMS to Lokalise for translations and back into the CMS to reference? So Don, this is the question is, what CMS are you using? If you're using one of the CMSs with which we have the ready build connector, then it will be pretty easy. Again, you can get in touch with our support guys. They will be happy to help you set up your integration, and then you'll be ready to roll. You will be able to import, export. It's pretty straightforward process. And in case it's another CMS that we don't have out-of-the-box connector with, then you can leverage our API. But again, this is something that our guys can help you out in terms of setting up. I think we had a couple of other questions. So Kyoko is asking, hi Kyoko, do you provide services like offering your engineers to help our system integrated with tools like GitHub or Webhook? Yes, Kyoko, that's correct. So we have the GitHub integration. This is something that I've shown a minute ago. And there's also possible to set up the custom webhooks. So for example, as I've said, whenever the task is finished or order is completed or translation is modified, then your system can receive a webhook so that you really create sort of an automated and never-ending process. Julian is asking, is there a way to export copy content from Lokalise to Word or another word processor? And alternatively, is there a versioning option? Julian, actually, yes to both. So it's possible in case there are two different project types that you can select. So one is a localization files, the other one is the document type for formats. And then in document type formats, there are a couple of formats available, and you can export your content to Word, even if you've imported in another format like HTML, for example. There is also a versioning available. So first of all, we have a full-blown translation history and activity where you can check what's happened and etc. etc. There is a comments and chat functionality built in where you can also communicate. There is also a branching feature available where you can create multiple branches based, on the version of your content. There can be a final branch, there can be some sub branches where you are still working on that. So there are really a couple of ways to tackle that problem. And I'd say how, what works best for you. I would recommend getting in touch with our customer success, customer support guys. They're doing a fantastic job of helping people to find the best workflows and best solutions for their needs. And I think the last question here, because we're running out of time a bit, Anak is asking, I don't have a question about today's meeting. It was informative and interesting. Thank you. Will or no other live meeting like this? Actually, Anak, yes. So we've already had another webinar on another topic, and we are planning to make it a regular series. Perhaps the next one will be about internationalization, hosted by another colleague of mine. So yeah, we'll keep you updated, and we'll definitely be doing more of these webinars. Cool. So I think I've answered all the questions. It was, yeah, thank you guys for joining this webinar. I really hope that it was useful and informative for you. And as I've said, we'll be definitely continuing the webinar series, trying to educate you on the different topics and angles within the whole big localization theme. And yeah, I wish you all a very nice day and hope to speak to you soon. Bye-bye and take care.